Thank you for your patience with me this week. We are talking about organization of an argument. I've asked you in the discussion board this week to work on outlining your plan for the final paper. We have done a lot of research and gotten ready for it, discussed different things. You have a clear thesis statement, so I think it's a good time to start working on organization. The Purdue OWL staff put together this great presentation that we're going to talk about today. If you ever want more information, you can definitely check out the Purdue OWL website, which is Online Writing Lab. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to look at, of course, we know that we're working toward building a research paper that argues a point of view. And so I think it's important to understand what an argument is and how it's a little bit different than a persuasive thing that we might have done in Composition 1. So an argument involves the process of establishing a claim, so that's in your thesis statement where you have a clear point of view, and then proving it with the use of logical reasoning, examples, and research. So if you think about that persuasive paper you wrote back in Comp 1, you would remember that one had a lot of an emotional appeal. You're trying to persuade the audience to agree with you on something. This is a bit different because you're using research to argue an established claim. So you're trying to prove it, but not necessarily using that emotional grab to persuade an audience. And you're really more arguing your point of view than trying to get someone else to agree with you on it. So when you organize an argument, I think it's very important to have an organized argument, first of all. Remember, organization guides an audience through your reasoning process. So that offers a clear explanation of each argued point, and it demonstrates the credibility of the writer. So think about it in terms of if you were watching a debate, and if the debaters were up there hemming and hawing and moving from different point to different point without having research to back it up or without having a clear point of view, a clear reference the entire time, then the lack of organization would make the argument ineffective. So what we're trying to do is use organization to guide our reader and to make sure that our credibility as a writer is sound. So you will offer a clear explanation of each argument. That's why we use so much research in an argument paper, because that's one of the ways that you can explain your point of view. So when you organize a paper, there's a basic strategy. Of course, you're going to start with a title. I don't want to see a title that says final essay or essay 5 or something like that. Your title should actually have some reflection on the topic that you're going to cover. And then, of course, we move into an introduction. The introduction is there to grab the reader's attention, to move the reader into your topic, and to clarify your thesis statement. After that, we know it becomes body paragraphs, and so those should have constructed topic sentences. It should build main points, build the points that are made in the thesis statement, and it should also reflect upon countering the opposition. So looking at what the opposite argument would be and using evidence to show how that argument is incorrect. And then, of course, a conclusion. So using the structure, which is very basic, really, you can build an even more detailed organization for your paper. So let's talk about what each of these are. So why would you need a title? I know that oftentimes we just want to stick on there essay 5 or whatever and just get it over with, but titles actually do serve a purpose. So they kind of work as an introductory element of the topic of the discussion, and it can work to generate reader interest. So when you develop a topic, it's important to think about it in terms of how can I represent the topic that I have for my entire paper? How can I grab the reader's attention? And it also needs to clearly line up with that topic rather than vaguely, because we don't want to just kind of stick something in there and let it hang. Instead, we want the title to generate that interest. And so one tip would be to use action verbs in titles. So for example, if your topic is clean campus, You could write cleaning up campus with recycling bins, or reducing rubbish, recycling on campus. So looking at the two, we have action words in the first one, cleaning up campus with recycling bins, which is it's clear on the topic and we understand what's going to happen. But the second one is a little bit more attention grabbing. So reducing rubbish, recycling on campus. So reducing rubbish is a little bit more active, and it also generates a little more interest just because of the word choice. It also has a bit of alliteration, which is fun. So alliteration is when we repeat the same sounds at the beginning of words, which adds emphasis. So we can use those literary techniques that we've talked about earlier in the term to create interest. So alliteration, generally you think of that in terms of poems and things, but you can use it to add emphasis to a point of view. So considering the title, so let's think about this in another light. So imagine you just wrote a paper offering solutions to the problem of road rage. So I'm sure all of us have either experienced this ourselves or have witnessed road rage. I know my dad, oh, it was awful when I was growing up. We actually got him one of these little boxes. Remember, this is the 80s, so it was this little mechanical box that if you press the button, it would like have gun sounds or like missile sounds or things blowing up. So with the hope of him using that instead of getting really mad at drivers. But if you were considering that particular topic for your argument, think about it in terms, okay, so here are the different titles. Road rage. Okay, that's very clear what the topic would be. Can't drive 55 has kind of a neat ring to it. It's a little bit of a rhyming element. Or road rage, curing our highway epidemic. So looking at these three different titles, I'm going to guess you could already figure out which one is the best one. But the first one is not extremely exciting. Doesn't have any active action words. It just states the topic. So it's okay. It's not particularly attention grabbing. The second one, Can't Drive 55, is a little bit more attention grabbing, but maybe not appropriate for the topic. So how does that relate to road rage? Sure, it's kind of a cute little title, but it makes me think about speed limits rather than road rage. And the third one, of course, states the topic, and then it has a more action-based verb, curing our highway epidemic, so curing, and it makes it seem like road rage is a very bad problem. It's an epidemic, so that's definitely a lot more attention-grabbing, and while it still shares the topic of the paper, so you can pretty much see which one is the best title. So when you think about titles, those should be short little quips. You can't introduce the topic and you generate interest of the reader. Now the introduction of your paper, for our paper, remember we don't use things like abstracts or anything like that. So if you see abstracts discussed in different formatting elements, don't worry about that. We're actually just moving right into an introductory paragraph. The introduction should acquaint the reader with the topic and purpose of the paper. And the introduction offers a plan for the argument. So it's going to tell them, the whole paper is going to be, you tell them what you're going to tell them in the introduction, then you tell them in the body, and then the conclusion, you tell them what you told them. So I like to think of this in terms of speech. I taught a couple speech classes when I worked at a high school, and some of you may remember that. But one of the things that you think about when you're looking at a speech is you remember that an audience doesn't always remember every element of your speech, but most likely they're going to remember the first part of your speech and the last part of your speech. And so those times in a speech are very important. You need to make sure that the audience grasps what you're talking about. So you share what you're going to tell them, and then reiterate it. So tell them again in the conclusion. So at least you think if they listen to the very first part and the very last part of my speech, they got the point. So in the same way, in an essay, the introduction and the conclusion should make the point clear, make the purpose of the paper clear, and it should reiterate that purpose in the conclusion. And the body of the paper is really meant to expand upon those ideas and really prove that point of view. So when you are developing an introduction, I like to think of it in three different elements in an introduction. You're going to have that attention grabber, the part that really gets the reader to want to read your paper, and it's going to share that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's going to share any background information you might need. That might be a definition of your topic. It might be some statistics to move you from that interesting attention grabber at the beginning to the thesis statement. But the second part is that background information. And then the third part of an introduction would be to share that thesis statement. So then how do we grab the reader's attention? You can do that in lots of different ways, and I have some examples here up on the board. The first one is a personal anecdote. That's a story of your own, something that you experienced. This helps generate an interest in the topic and on a personal level. And I do recommend that we keep those to a minimum, just because we're trying to write an argument paper rather than a persuasive paper. So sometimes using personal anecdotes can be a little too emotional, and we want to be a little bit more removed from the topic than you would generally in a persuasive paper. But personal anecdotes can make that personal connection with the reader and generate interest, because generally we're going to, when we read anything, going to try to relate to it in some way. So being able to relate to the audience is very important. Another thing you could do to grab the reader's attention would be to share an example. And this could be real or hypothetical, so it doesn't have to be something that actually happened. You can kind of set the scene in terms of what could happen, or sharing an example that would relate to the topic. So you think about the road rage element. I already shared a little personal anecdote about my dad, but you could also share examples, maybe a hypothetical example of a guy driving to work and how, traffic happens when you're driving to work into the city and it's congested, and what happens if he gets road rage. So you can kind of share this hypothetical example of a guy driving to work, and that could generate interest in your paper. Other things you can do, you can ask questions. Questions often engage the reader. This is the same kind of thing. You want to keep these to a minimum. You don't want to overwhelm the audience with questions, but if you asked a few at the beginning, it can generate interest, get your reader thinking about your topic. And then one thing you could do with a question at the conclusion element, you can answer those questions, so it kind of brings your paper into full circle, which is an effective use of the tool. So other things you could do, you could share a quotation from your research or from a famous person that would have credibility with that topic. You could share startling statistics, something that would shock the reader into interest in your paper, or share a striking image. So that's actually describing something with your five senses writing. So that's an image, not actually putting a picture in your paper, but actually describing a picture in your paper. So that's a striking image. I remember I did that with a paper once that was about literary analysis, and I used the image of a bridge and I took, set the scene of a picturesque town with this bridge and all this stuff, and I used that to then be a metaphor for the type of literary analysis I was doing. So you can use those types of descriptive details to grab the reader's attention. And then finally, after you share the attention grabber and you get some background information going, the thesis statement should be the last sentence or two at the end of your introduction. So it's the most important sentence in your paper. I know that's a little bit overwhelming, but it is, because it's really captures the main idea of your paper. It lets the reader know what's going to happen. What are you trying to prove? What is your point of view? And it's the claim that you're making, the argument that you're going to make. So yeah, it's very important, and it sets the tone for the rest of the paper. So your thesis statement should be strong. It should share a clear point of view, and it shouldn't be wishy-washy. We shouldn't well, maybe this way or maybe that way. These people believe this, these people believe that. We really want to see a solid thesis statement that shares your point of view and makes a claim that you're going to prove throughout the rest of your paper. And the role of the thesis statement, remember, it should guide your reader through your argument. So like I said, it's kind of like a roadmap. So you set up the map at the beginning of the paper, and then the reader can easily follow the steps and the directions that are given throughout the rest of the body of the paper, they understand what's going to happen. We don't want to leave our readers in the dark, okay? So the thesis statement should clearly state your topic. It should clearly state your point of view about the topic and then where you're going to take the paper. So it's generally located at the introduction of the paper. It's generally located at the end. And a thesis statement could sometimes be located within the body of the paper or in the conclusion. Generally speaking, we're not doing that with our essays, but it does happen. And I actually think that the thesis statement should kind of show up throughout the entire paper. Yes, it should be the 1 to 2 sentences at the end of your introduction, but the conclusion also works to restate the thesis statement in a new way. So you're going to see it in the conclusion, not exactly word for word, but the point that you're making is going to be there. And then each body paragraph in your essay is going to work to prove that thesis statement. So we should see a connection to the thesis statement the entire paper. So you should see it throughout. But what I'm asking for is a 1 to 2 sentence statement at the end of your introduction for a thesis statement for our papers. So let's look at a few thesis statements, some different options. So the argument is about the need for V-chips in television sets. Okay. So the first one, parents often too busy watching television shows with their families, too busy to watch television shows with their families, can monitor their children's viewing habits with the aid of a V-chip. Second one, to help parents monitor their children's viewing habits, the V-chip should be a required feature for television sets sold in the U.S. Okay, the third one, this paper will describe a V-chip and examine the uses of V-chip in American-made television sets. So let's talk about each of these. The first one clearly states a topic. It lets us know what a V-chip is, what the purpose of it is, and that parents would benefit from it, okay? But what I don't see is a clear argument. I don't see a point that is being made or a purpose to the paper so much as an informative paper, that this is an option that parents have, rather than arguing needs to be done. The third one kind of goes the opposite direction. It tells you exactly what the paper is going to do. It even uses this introductory element, this paper, which I definitely say never do. Okay, so don't, unless you're writing a scientific essay for a research project in a science field, you want to avoid using statements like this paper in your thesis statement. We're not going to announce what's going to happen. We're actually going to present the topic and the purpose of our paper through the language that we have. So right away, the third one isn't going to work. The second one, however, is a little stronger. So we see, to help parents monitor their children's viewing habits, the V-chip should be a required feature. So that has a clear point of view. It's saying this needs to happen. And when does it need to happen? It needs to happen in the United States, and it needs to happen in all television sets. And this is the reason why. It's because parents need to monitor their children's viewing habits. So the purpose of the paper is clear, the topic of the paper is clear, and that point of view that the writer is going to take is very clear in the paper. We don't see, I think it should be required. We say it should be required. It's a strong statement. So once you have developed your introduction, your thesis statement, then you start to organize the body of your essay. And actually, you could do this in any order, but that's just the order of a paper. Remember, you can write different parts of the paper at different times, and it's fine. But body paragraphs build upon the claims made in the introduction paragraph, and they're organized with the use of topic sentences. Body paragraphs work very similar to the entire essay format because they have a topic sentence, which is similar to a thesis statement. They have supporting details, which would be similar to body paragraphs, and they have a kind of a wrap-up conclusion area too. So each element of a paragraph should illustrate that main idea spoken about in the topic sentence. So here's a tip: offering a brief explanation of the history or recent developments of the topic within the early body paragraphs can help the audience become familiarized with your topic and the complexity of the issue. Think about, we have 8 pages to fill here. So I think that sharing solid background information about your topic will be beneficial for your paper. So if you want to just share the history or the recent developments of the topic, or even the back and forth side of the arguments that you have for this particular topic can help establish that background information that the reader needs to have. So keep in mind that that's something that you can do when you're organizing your paper. I do suggest putting it at the beginning. It doesn't have to be the very first body paragraph, but somewhere toward the beginning to establish that point, that topic, so the reader understands what this whole thing is about. So paragraphs can be ordered in lots of different ways depending upon your topic and purpose for your argument. So that they can move from general to specific. So you think about the topic sentence being more general and then moving into specific ideas. And you could actually do that within each body paragraph. So the first body paragraph would be more general, and then you move into specific details as you move through your argument. Other things, you could try the most important argument first to the least important argument. And when you're organizing body paragraphs, that's kind of an impactful thing. So if you start with the most important thing, you already impact your audience right away, and then you just continue to convince them throughout the paper. Other things, you could do the opposite of that. You start with your weakest claim, and then you move to your strongest claim, using that strong claim at the end to really pack the final punch. So there's lots of different ways that you can organize a paper, and you really have to determine that on your own in terms of what your research is showing you, what arguments you have available, and who your audience is. I do encourage you to offer, and this is part of the assignment really, is you need to look at the opposing view. So by addressing the claims of the opposition in an argument, it helps to convince the reader, and it helps to show your credibility as a writer. So if you've researched both sides of an argument or multiple sides of an argument, it shows that you've come to an informed decision. You're not just basing everything on your emotions, basing everything on just the things that you grew up with. You actually have looked at the entire argument, looked at all the different sides, and you've come up with a clear understanding and point of view that you have found is logical according to what you've looked at. And also addressing the claims of the opposition shows that you've considered other point of views. And that's also a form of credibility. So it shows that you are open-minded, that you understand that there are lots of other things available, and you've considered them. Notice that there are valid and reasonable viewpoints on the opposition, but you have a clear logical explanation of why you still feel the way that you do about the topic. So we've been researching a lot in the last few weeks, especially with our annotated bibliographies that we turned in. So I'm sure that you've come across the counter argument for your paper. But you can also, if you're still having trouble finding it, it can be located at various locations when you're in your research. And then when you start to organize your paper, you don't have to put it at a specific place in the essay. You can actually determine that based on the level of argument. You could put it at the very beginning to establish those all the different points of view available, and then show how throughout the rest of your paper how your particular point of view is correct. But you could choose to build each of your main points as a contrast. So you could actually build the entire paper contrasting the opposition, which is a reasonable way to present something. So if you presented your point of view at the very beginning, shared what the different arguments are, and then showed every time that the opposition is wrong, that can be a very strong organization. Another way you could do it is if you offer a counter argument after you've articulated your claim. So you articulate all the things that you have to say about a topic, and then share the counter argument and how it relates to those things that you've already claimed. That can also be a strong point of view to take in locating your argument, your counter arguments, into the body of your paper. The most important thing when you are determining the structure of the body of your essay, and especially when you look at counter arguments, is to consider your audience. So if you think that you're going to come across a hostile audience, so even think about the discussion boards so far in the class when we've talked about your topic, Do you find a lot of people agreeing with you? Do you find a lot of people disagreeing with you? And so that can also help you determine the audience that you have. So is your audience hostile? Is it wavering? Is it agreeable? So that can definitely affect the way in which you approach a counter argument. But conceding to some of your opposition's concerns can demonstrate respect for their opinions, and that can help establish that connection with the audience if it's an audience that is hostile to your topic. Of course, using rude or deprecating language can cause your audience to reject your position, even if they agree with you on some level, because just being rude or deprecating puts most people off. So try to remain tactful yet firm on your position. Think back to that thesis statement before where it said it should be done. This is a use of strong language without being deprecating to the audience. But when you are integrating research material, that should happen in the body of your paper. When you're thinking about sharing your organization plan, you could even stick in some of your research, like, oh, I think this one would work out here. And that can help you in terms of when you start to write your paper as well. But research material can aid you in proving the claims of your argument and disproving opposition's claims. Be sure that you use your research to support claims made in your topic sentences. So the research that you have done that you want to integrate into your paper should relate to the overall topic of a paragraph. Remember, it's working to prove what you have to say rather than take the place of what you have to say. So finally, you're going to then plan your conclusion. So the conclusion reemphasizes the main points made in your paper. I also so the introduction has 3 parts. I think that the conclusion also should have 3 parts. So it should restate the thesis statement in a new way, like we said earlier. It should also reiterate the main points that you have talked about in the body of the essay, and it should kind of, what I like to call, put the essay to bed. So it lets the reader know that the essay is coming to a close, and it could do that in a variety of ways. So, for instance, you can reiterate a call to action or speculate on the future for the topic. I would avoid new information in the conclusion. New information can make the reader feel like the paper should continue rather than stop. So that does not put the essay to bed. So don't raise new claims in your conclusion. You guys could check out these websites. Other things about the conclusion, though, when you try to wrap things up, one way to do so effectively would be to look back on that attention grabber that you had in the introduction. Try to reiterate that in some way. So like I mentioned before, if you have asked a question in the introduction, answer the question in the conclusion. If you have a hypothetical situation with a guy that has road rage at the beginning, then share a hypothetical situation where he is now calm and able to handle his road rage in some more effective manner. So you can actually use the introduction elements to bring the essay to a close as well. So that's all I have for this presentation. Thank you again for your patience this week. I've already posted this PowerPoint presentation to the class, but now you have my voice connected to it. If you do have any questions, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Otherwise, we will continue to see you in the discussion board. Have a great night.